أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. محاضرة الدكتور السيد جعفر راح تنطلق. عندنا الأخوات موصينهم يوصون الأخوات بالهدوء، أكو قطع يفترون بيها، يطلبون من الأخوات الهدوء رجاء الصوت حتى نباشر بالمحاضرة. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of God, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Respected sisters, dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight, inshallah, we will continue with the same theme that we have been discussing regarding our ability to recognize the truth from falsehood. This time by applying the theme to one of our core beliefs, the belief of us having an imam and living in the time of an imam who will come out at the end of times and who will fill the world with justice and equality after it has been filled with injustice and oppression. The discussion of today, inshallah, is going to center around a question. The question of the extent to which the movement of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam is related to the movement of Imam al-Mahdi ajalallah ta'ala farajahu al-sharif. And this is a complex, subtle, deep topic that we cannot get into in its full depth today, but we want to at least be able to provide the core elements of an answer to this question. We believe as Muslims and as followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that this world is not going to end unless and until there is a man from the household of the Holy Prophet who will come out at the end of times and who will fill this world with justice and equality as it has been filled with injustice and oppression. And we believe that this is consistent and in line with the Quranic teachings as well. If we go back to verses from Surah Al-Qasas, verse from Surah Al-Anbiya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it has been written, it has been prophesied, it has been promised in the Psalms after it was promised in the remembrance of the Torah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants those who are virtuous among His servants to inherit the earth. And in Surah Al-Qasas He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants those who have been oppressed to become the imams and to become the rulers over the land. And we believe that this is entirely consistent with our belief in the Imam of our time, Imam al-Mahdi ajalallah ta'ala farajahu al-sharif. This is in general a core element of our beliefs. The question is, when we understand the world in which we live and where we are headed, what is the relationship between this belief, this element of our faith, to believe in Imam al-Mahdi ajalallah farajah and his movement at the end of times, and the movement of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam? Perhaps some of you have heard that these two movements, these two imams, have missions that are somehow connected to each other. They relate to each other. What we're trying to see is to what extent or in what way or how do these two imams and these two elements relate to each other in our belief. There's a few things that we can mention as answers to this question. The first one has to do with the manner in which our religion, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has engineered this world in a way that Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallah Farajah is a direct descendant of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. There are multiple ahadith from the Holy Prophet, from Imam Ali alayhi salam, and from Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam himself explaining this. In one hadith, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam says, "Minna ithna ashara mahdiya, awwaluhum amirul mu'minin, wa akhiruhum at-tasi' min wuldi, wa huwa al-qa'imu bil-haqq." Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen 12 rightly guided men, 12 rightly guided servants, saints, which we refer to as Mahdi. And the first of them is Amir al-Mu'mineen, the prince of the believers. And the last of them is the one who rises. So the Imam is referring to all the Imams as being Mahdi. All of them are a Mahdi. But the one that we refer to as al-Mahdi, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam says, this is the last one, and he will be the one who rises. Okay, وَهُوَ الْقَائِمُ وَآخِرُهُمُ التَّاسِعُ. The Imam says, and he will be the 9th of my sons. Why is this relevant? First of all, the fact that Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam in this hadith is the one himself who is saying it shows us that there is a direct connection from Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and Imam al-Mahdi. Secondly, the Imam says that all of these 12 men, all of them are Mahdis. All of them are people who are rightly guided. They are guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a divine mission to guide humanity. This is an important element in the argumentation of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. The third element, and this is where it starts to get a lot more interesting, but many of us, perhaps because we take things for granted, we do not realize the importance of this hadith. When Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam says two things, that he is of my descendants and he is the 9th. When we go to other Muslims, we see that all Muslims are unanimous in their belief in a Mahdi, a man who appears at the end of times and who will have the characteristics that we just described. Where there is doubt, where there are confusions or questions, are specifically about these two traits, these two characteristics that Imam Husayn alayhi salam is giving. The first is that if you go back to the writings, let's say, of the Sunni scholars, you will see that some of them say that Imam al-Mahdi is going to be from the descendants of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam and not Imam al-Husayn. The second is that many of them believe, and many of their scholars believe, that Imam al-Mahdi is going to be born at the end of times. He's not alive today. He will be born at the end of times. So let's look at each one of these claims quickly. The first one is that they believe, some of them believe, that Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallah Farajah is a descendant of Imam al-Hasan. Why? If you go back to the narrations that talk about Imam al-Mahdi, from the time of the Holy Prophet onwards, the Holy Prophet gave different descriptions of Imam al-Mahdi. In some of them he says he is from Quraysh. In some of them he says he is from Bani Hashim. In some of them he says he is from the sons or the children of Fatima. If you look at these ahadith by themselves on their own, you may conclude that he is therefore the son of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. There is no issue with that, because he would still fit all of these descriptions. And this is where you start to see the importance of looking at these further ahadith. And this is where we start seeing that the only person to whom this can apply is the Mahdi in which we believe in. First of all, that he is the son of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And in fact, we even have ahadith from Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam who explain that al-Mahdi is from the descendants of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. There is further confusion perhaps that resulted in history. This would be a whole chapter of history that we would need to study. That the descendants of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam led multiple revolutions against the oppression of their time. From the time of the first descendants of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam and for many generations. There is a man, at some point, he rose against the oppression of his time by the name of An-Nafs al-Zakiyah. He was a descendant of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. He is the son of Abdullah, who is the son of Al-Hasan, who is the son of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. In the battle of Karbala, Imam al-Hasan lost a number of sons, One of them who fought under Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was called Al-Hasan. Al-Hasan al-Muthanna. Al-Hasan ibn al-Hasan. He came to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. He fought in Karbala. He got multiple injuries and he fell in the battlefield. And everyone believed him to be dead. And so they left him. Until the captives were taken out of Karbala after the 10th of Muharram, when the captives were taken towards Kufa, it is said that they found him. They came walking through the bodies and they found him. And one version says they took him directly to Kufa. The family members of his mother's side, they came and they lived in Kufa and they found him and they took him to Kufa. And others say he was taken as part of the captives. And then when he was brought to Kufa, his family intervened and took him when they found him to be still alive. He had 18 injuries on his body, but he was still alive. And so they took him in Kufa, the rest of his family. They took care of him for about 3 or 4 months until he healed. And then he joined the rest of the family of the Holy Prophet in Medina al-Munawwara, where he lived. This is Al-Hasan al-Muthanna. In fact, he's the one who married the daughter of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, Fatima bint al-Husayn. He is her husband. Imam al-Husayn had chosen her for him before the events of Karbala. Today we would call it as an engagement. And he finally married her after the events of Karbala when he returned to al-Madinah al-Munawwara and they had children together. This man, Al-Hasan al-Muthanna, had a son by the name of Abdullah. Sometimes he's called Abdullah al-Kamil or Abdullah al-Mahd. This Abdullah was also a righteous, virtuous man, and he had one of his sons called Muhammad. Muhammad was so righteous and so full of knowledge and so brave that people used to refer to him as An-Nafs al-Zakiyya. And some of his followers started to create this rumor around him, around his reputation, that he is in fact Al-Mahdi. He is the one who is promised to appear at the end of times. And so they fabricated false narrations saying the Holy Prophet said that Al-Mahdi will carry my name, which is true, and that his father will carry the name of my father, which is not true. But it applies to Muhammad al-Nafs al-Zakiyya because his name is Muhammad and his father's name is Abdullah. And so they would say that this is Al-Mahdi. And these ahadith are still present in many books where they say that he is a descendant of Imam al-Hasan and that his name is the name of the Prophet and his father's name is the name of the father's Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In any case, this is a chapter of history, and when we study Islamic history, we see that the Muslims in general, the Abbasids in particular, in the lineage of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, the issue of the movement of Imam al-Mahdi ajallahu farajah was also very, very present. The Abbasid rulers would call many of their sons by the name of al-Mahdi, hoping that people would accept them and follow them blindly and accept them as their religious leaders because they are matching some description of Imam al-Mahdi, including, for instance, simply his name. Right? In any case. So the first aspect where there might be confusion around Imam al-Mahdi is that he is born from Imam al-Hasan or Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. These ahadith make it very clear that Imam al-Mahdi ajallahu farajah is a direct descendant of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and not Imam al-Hasan. The second aspect of these ahadith is that Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam specifically says in this hadith, and as we said in the ahadith from the Holy Prophet, Imam Ali alayhi salam and many others, not only is he a descendant from Imam al-Husayn, he is the 9th descendant from Imam al-Husayn. Why is this relevant? Why is this important? Because the other area of confusion, the other area where there are questions, is that Imam al-Mahdi ajallahu farajah is said to not be born yet. They say that Imam al-Mahdi will be born at the end of times. He's not alive today. If Imam al-Mahdi is going to be born at the end of times, even though he might be a descendant of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, it would mean that maybe he is descendant number 50, descendant number 75 of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. But when Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam or the Holy Prophet or the ahadith clearly state, not only is he a descendant of Imam al-Husayn, but that he is the 9th, it means necessarily that he is already born. And then we would simply have to count how many generations after Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam to see in which generation would he be. And no one matches the description that we have in these ahadith except the man that we believe in to be Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallah Farajah, and therefore this man must remain alive until he fills the earth with justice and equality. And so this is the importance, and this is the first tie and the first link between Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallah Farajah, so that it doesn't remain open. Not everyone can just come and claim to be al-Mahdi, nor should we be believing anyone who simply is said to be al-Mahdi if they do not meet these descriptions, which very clearly restrict who can be the Mahdi at the end of times. That's the first point. The second point is that if we look at what has been called the slogan, what we call the shi'ar, the banner, the heading under which this man is going to rise at the end of times, we see that it is directly related to the movement of Karbala. And there are multiple narrations in this regard. One of the narrations that talk specifically about this, we have many narrations that clearly state that Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallah Farajah, when he rises, his banner is going to be, his flag is going to be, Ya li tharat al-Husayn, that he is seeking revenge for the blood of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And we'll come to that point. In one of the narrations, it's not only stated in this way. In fact, it's the narration that we often hear at the beginning of the month of Muharram, when Ibn Shabib, the companion of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, says, I came and I saw Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. I entered and I saw him in this state of sadness. This is a long narration, and we don't always pay attention to the end of that narration. We focus on the beginning to emphasize the importance of the majalis, to the gathering, to crying and weeping over Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. In it, he says, Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, you will remember, he says, the people of the Jahiliyyah used to sanctify and consider the month of Muharram holy. But the people of this nation, they failed to recognize the holiness of this month, and they attacked and they killed the progeny of their prophet during this holy month. And he says they slaughtered Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam as they slaughter the sheep. And then he says, and they killed 18 members of his family. None of them have anyone similar to them on this world, on this planet. Each one of them is unique in his own way, he says. These are divine saints, each one of them. None of them have anyone who resembles them in any way, 18 of them. And then he continues, the Imam says, and the heavens, they wept, and the earth wept for Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And then he says, and then 4,000 angels descended to help Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. They did not help him on the day of Karbala, so they remain at the grave of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And if you could see them, you would see that they are full of dust. They look like they are not kept well. They're not clean and dirty, because they're in a state of mourning and sadness over Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam since the time that he was martyred. And they remain at his grave, and they are at his grave today, these 4,000 angels. And what are they waiting for? Imam Rida alayhi salam says, and they are waiting for the rise of the Mahdi. They are waiting for the rise of the Imam, so that they rise with him carrying the banner غبر شعث إلى أن يقوم القائم فيكونون من أنصاره وشعارهم يا لثارات الحسين. The banner that they carry is that same banner that we have in our narrations that Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallah Farajah carries, يا لثارات الحسين. We are seeking revenge for the blood of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. Now someone might get confused here. What is it that Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallah Farajah is trying to avenge if the killers of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam are no longer in this world? This is a question we may come up with because we think that we're analytical and smart. This is a question that was asked to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam in his time. They asked Imam al-Sadiq, they told him, will the killers of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam be alive at the end of times? Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam said, no, they will all be dead. So who is Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallah Farajah seeking revenge from? What is this banner that he carries that says, Ya li tharat al-Husayn? Revenge against whom if all these people have died? Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah. And Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam said, there will be people who are in full agreement with the enemies that killed Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. There are people who were in agreement with their actions, the actions of Bani Umayyah who were killing Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. If they had been alive at the time of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and in Karbala, they would have participated in the people killing Imam al-Husayn. They were not given that opportunity. Had they been given that opportunity and had they been alive, they would have been with Bani Umayyah killing Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And then the Imam says, anyone who agrees with the actions of a people is one of them. Anyone who shares and participates in the beliefs of a people, they will be gathered with them. And so this tells us that at the time when Imam al-Mahdi ajalallah farajah rises, there will be people who have the same beliefs and have the same values and believe in the same things that of the people who killed Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And of course we can assume from that, therefore, that those people are going to be the enemies of Imam al-Mahdi ajalallah farajah, and they will be the ones who will stand in his way. And this is why we see that, or how we see that both of these missions are sharing the same set of values and the same beliefs. Which brings us to the next point, the commonality between these two movements. One of the greatest commonalities, the shared points between these two movements, is that they share the same drivers. The reason why both of these imams rise is because they share the same driver, the same reason for rising. We don't have time to go through all the quotes from Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam in which he explains why he rose. Why did Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam rise? He explains very carefully, very clearly, very explicitly in a number of sermons, in a number of letters, in a number of narrations, answers that he gave to people. The reason that I am rising, he says, is what? لِطَلَبَ الْإِصْلَاحِ فِي أُمَّةِ جَدِّي. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam says, I am rising to reform the nation of my grandfather, the messenger of God. I want to reform this world. This Islam has been corrupted. This world is now full of corruption. The reason I am rising is to reform the world from this corruption, to cleanse the world from this corruption. This is the driver. When we go to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, when he talks about Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, we went through these ahadith, through these ziyarat, where Imam al-Sadiq says the reason he rose is that he wants to rescue the people from misguidance and from ignorance. لِيَسْتَنْقِذَ عِبَادَكَ مِنَ الْجَهَالَةِ وَحِيرَةِ الضَّلَالَةِ. In another narration, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam explains the role of an imam, that he plays this role of guidance and cleansing the earth from corruption and oppression. When we go to the movement of Imam al-Mahdi ajalallah farajah, this is clearly stated as the reason why he rises. We all know the ahadith that say, and the world will have been filled with injustice and oppression, and he will cleanse it. He will fill it with justice. He will fill it with equity, just as it has been filled or had been filled. Sometimes in Arabic, some people distort the hadith. The real hadith is كما ملئت ظلما وجورا, not بعد ما ملئت. It's not that it happens after. The point here is not that this is something that happens after something. The point is that this is just as the world has been filled with injustice and oppression, the Imam will refill it with justice and equity. The only difference that perhaps we would add here is that when we look at the movement of Imam al-Mahdi ajalallah farajah, this is a movement that is supposed to be encompassing the entirety of the globe, the entirety of the world. Whereas the movement of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was a movement to rectify and reform mainly within the nation of the Holy Prophet, to put Islam back on track. And we believe that ultimately this is the same driver, this is the same goal, except that the manner in which it happens because of the conditions and circumstances of the world, Imam al-Mahdi will generalize this to the entirety of the planet, whereas Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was acting mainly on the religion of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A fourth element that is common between the movement of the two Imams is that if we look at the description of the companions of both Imams, we see that they are very similar. When you go back, and we don't have time to give examples, you all know them by now, the lives of the companions of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and how he talks about them. He says that these are the best of companions. I cannot think of any companions who are better than you, better than the companions of the Holy Prophet, the prophets, the Imams. These are the best companions that anyone could ever hope for and wish for. No one beats them in their devotion. No one beats them in their worship. No one beats them in their bravery. These were the companions of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. When you go to the description of the companions of Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah, you find the matching description of his companions. They are referred in many, many ahadith that talk about who will be the companions of Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah. In one narration it says, for instance, that they are the ones who are the monks of the night, the lions of the day. Right? They are full of worship. They are full of intimate worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, piety, religiousness. And you see that in the manner in which they spend their nights and the manner in which they spend their days. They are full of bravery. It's not that they remain as monks all the time. Depending on their circumstances, they act in the right way. This is a description of the companions of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. You see that very clearly when you move from the night of Muharram on the 10th to the 10th. You see the difference. How they spent that whole night in worship and in prayer and in reading the Holy Quran, and in the day they became the warriors that we know on the 10th of Muharram. Finally, and we'll end with this, the commonalities between them goes beyond the commonalities and what is shared in their movements to the actual ties between them. When we look at the presence of Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah in the teachings, in the mind, in the heart of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, this is very clear. I just finished reading a book where the author only put together a hadith about Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah from Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. It's a 45-page book. Only a hadith from Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam about Imam al-Mahdi. That's a lot of ahadith from Imam al-Husayn, who is 9 generations before Imam al-Mahdi. And we began the lecture with a hadith from Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. Imam al-Mahdi is very present to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam at all times, and you see that very, very clearly. At some point, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, when he talks about the end of the world and he describes al-Mahdi ajjallahu farajah, he says that he is the one who is going to be bringing the world back alive. يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا. This is how the Quran talks about rain when it falls on a land that is barren, that is dead. Right? Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam uses the same description. He says al-Mahdi is the one who, when he rises, he is the one who brings the world back from its death. It's a dead world, dead spiritually, dead religiously. The hearts are dead. Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah is the one who brings all of this back to life. And there is this notion in the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, it's a deep notion, where we perhaps see a glimpse of the role of Karbala and how it attaches to the mission of Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah because of that term. The term is Fath. If you go back to Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, you see how they talk about this notion of Fath. Its real meaning is usually attributed to the movement of Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah. Fath usually means victory. So if you see verses of the Quran talking about victory, usually we understand them as specific events, usually having to do with war and peace happening in the life of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When you go to the meanings that are explained to us from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, in a lot of cases they say each one of these verses that talk about Fath, they're talking about the victory that will come. This victory has not happened yet. The victory will happen at the end of times. This is not a full victory what you're seeing in the world right now. Including إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. You go back to the verses of the Quran, Ahlul Bayt say, this Nasr, this victory that will happen, has not happened yet. This is not the victory of the Holy Prophet. This was not a victory. The killing of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam is proof that it was not a victory. The victory is yet to happen. Now, if we understand this, let's go back to something Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam wrote. At some point he wrote a letter. He wrote a lot of letters on his way to Karbala and in Karbala. In one of the letters, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, he wrote to his brother, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. He wrote, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, min al-Husayn ibn Ali ila Muhammad ibn Ali, wa min qablihi or min qibalihi min Bani Hashim amma ba'd. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam is writing, saying this is from Husayn ibn Ali to Muhammad son of Ali, his brother, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, and to the rest of Bani Hashim. What does the Imam say? Look at these couple of words, keeping in mind what we just said. The Imam writes, فَإِنَّ مَنْ لَحِقَ بِي اسْتُشْهِدْ وَمَنْ لَمْ يَلْحَقْ بِي لَمْ يُدْرِكِ الْفَتْحِ وَالسَّلَامِ. That's it. This is the whole letter of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Why would he write this? He says, whoever has followed me has achieved, has reached martyrdom. This is clear. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَلْحَقْ بِي. As for those who do not follow me, or those who do not follow in my footsteps, يَلْحَقْ. You go behind, to go behind someone. What happens? لَمْ يُدْرِكِ الْفَتْحِ. They will not achieve, they will not reach, they will not witness al-fath. They will not witness the victory. Which victory? Imam Husayn alayhi salam, he just said he is getting killed, and everyone with him is getting killed. There's martyrdom. He said, whoever is with me is going to be killed. One way to understand it is to say, therefore, the victory Imam Husayn is talking about is martyrdom. And that makes sense. It is martyrdom. Martyrdom is a great victory. To be killed, standing for justice against injustice, that's a great victory. Perhaps the Imam is talking metaphorically about the movement of Karbala in general, that it is a victory. And of course, what a victory. 14 centuries later, and inshallah for millennia, if humanity continues, people continue to mention Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and to remember him and to live by his principles. That's a great victory. And perhaps Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam is referring to the notion that we said is in the school of Ahl al-Bayt. The true victory is a victory through Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah. Imam al-Husayn is saying, you want to join, you want to participate in the movement of al-Mahdi, you want to participate in the ultimate victory of history, then the way to do so is to coming through me, following me. Man yalhaq wa man lam yalhaq. The one who follows in my footsteps, the one who participates in my movement, the one who attends these majalis. You play a role in the movement of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam to secure your place, to secure your seat in the movement of Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah. This is the link. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, in one way or another, he is becoming, this is why he is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to avenge. Through Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah. Right? You remember we talked about Ziyarat Ashura, and Ziyarat Ashura he is referred to as Ya Thar Allah, Wabna Tharih. You are the blood that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to avenge, and you are the son of the blood that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to avenge. How does Allah avenge that blood? He avenges it through Al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah. How do I secure my place in this movement? Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam says, you have to follow me. By following me, you are going to witness the victory. This is how you guarantee your spot. This is how you guarantee your seat in the movement of Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-sharif. There's a lot more that we can say here, but we skip to the musibah. When we look at these ziyarat, we see that Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam is doing all of this, yes, for himself, and yes, because that is the duty and that's what the Imam has to do at that time. This is the duty of the time. But in another way, if what you're saying is true, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam is doing this to create today what we would call a factory. Karbala, Ashura is a factory that produces, every factory produces something. Karbala produces people who become followers and supporters and participants in the movement of Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah. This is a factory of supporters of the Imam, directly and indirectly. Karbala makes you a participant in the movement of Imam al-Mahdi. But at what cost? At what sacrifice did the Imam have to do all of this? We're told that on the 10th of Muharram, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, after the morning passes by and the noon prayer happens, and after the noon prayer, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was left all alone. Most of his companions had died by the noon prayer. And after the noon prayer, after Salatul Dhuhr, most of Bani Hashim had been killed by then. Until at the end, the historians say the Imam stood alone on the battlefield. The only one with him was his brother Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. And we have to mention Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas because we haven't mentioned him yet in this year. He was a mountain of knowledge and faith and resilience and courage and strength for Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. He would still, despite everything that had happened, he was the one who presented his three brothers to go and fight between and in front of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam with pride. He had seen all the events of Karbala until now. And at the end he was still standing with Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, carrying the flag, carrying the banner. He had asked Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam multiple times to enter the battle. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam every time refused, telling him, if you are to enter the battle, then I will no longer have an army. You are my army. Al-Abbas alone represents an army to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. He told him, if you enter the battle, then my army is done. So finally Al-Abbas, after everyone has been killed, he comes to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and he tells him, I can no longer bear to hear these children crying and knowing that they will soon die out of thirst without trying to get some water for them. Do you allow me to enter simply to get water for the children? Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam says, if you must, then go and get water for the children and come back. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam never allowed Al-Abbas to enter the battlefield as a warrior. He's telling him, your only mission, the only thing I'm allowing you to do is to go and get us water. Do what you need to get us water. Al-Abbas enters the battlefield carrying the water bag. He did not go towards the army. He went directly towards the water. Umar ibn Sa'd had positioned 4,000 soldiers to prevent anyone from reaching the water. Al-Abbas headed directly towards them. And he fought them enough that he removed the 4,000 away from the water and he entered into the water. And he filled the water bag with water. And then he put his hand in the water and he was about to take a scoop, a handful of water to drink. And then he remembered the thirst of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And he recited his first verses of poetry, famous verses in which he says, Ya nafsu min ba'd al-Husayni huni. My soul, you must now become cheap. You can't give yourself that much importance. Why? It no longer matters whether you exist or you do not exist. This is Husayn standing there about to drink from the cup of death, and you want to drink a cup of fresh water? I swear that these are not the teachings of my religion, nor the conduct of a man who has certainty in truth. Al-Abbas got back on his horse in the middle of the water, and he came back heading towards the camp of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, rushing, his only preoccupation to get the water to the children. Al-Abbas in that time, he chose a different route. He did not go through the normal battlefield so that people would not get to the water that he is carrying. So he went through the palm trees. And so they would, out of fear of fighting him directly, they would try to ambush Al-Abbas along the way, until one man was able to hit the right arm of Al-Abbas from behind a palm tree, and he cut off the right arm of Al-Abbas. And Al-Abbas recited verses of poetry saying, I swear that if you cut off my right arm, I will continue to defend my religion. And he took his sword in his left arm, and he continued to move towards the camp. And then another man was able to hit Al-Abbas on his left arm and cut it off. And Al-Abbas held on, and he recited more verses of poetry, holding on to the water bag, moving as fast as he can towards the camp of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. At that time there is a rain of arrows, it is said, that landed on the body and the water bag of Al-Abbas. This is when the water bag got hit with the arrows and the water spilled. And Al-Abbas stood still in the middle of the battlefield. There is no water to bring to the children. There are no arms to go back to the battlefield and fight with. And so he stood still for a moment to see what he would do next. And this is when an arrow landed in the eye of Al-Abbas alayhi salam. And it is said that the blood gushed and covered his other eye as well. Al-Abbas is no longer able to see. Now they will dare to attack Al-Abbas. It is said that Al-Abbas dismounted from his horse and he put the arrow that was in his eye between his knees to remove it, and a man came and hit him with a pole of metal right on the head. Al-Abbas fell to the ground, crying out, sending his salutations to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, saying, "Akhi ya Husayn, minni alayka salam." Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam rushed towards his brother Al-Abbas. As he started to move towards Al-Abbas, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam said these words that history records, saying, "Now they have broken my back. Now they have scattered my army. Now my enemy can hope to achieve victory over me." And he headed towards Al-Abbas, and as he started to get closer and closer to Abbas, he saw the state that he was in. He's lying on the ground, no arms, an arrow in one eye, and the water spilled. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam started to walk towards Al-Abbas, who could not see what is happening. He's lying on the ground. Al-Abbas heard someone coming towards him. He thought that this is someone who is coming to behead him. So he told him, "I beseech you by whatever God you worship, I want you to give me a few moments so that my brother comes to me, so that he smells me and I smell him, and he talks to me and I talk to him." Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam told him, "It is I, your brother Abbas. It is I, Husayn." He came to Al-Abbas, he sat on the ground, and he put his head in his lap. And Al-Abbas removed his head. And Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam did this 2 or 3 times, where he would put the head of Abbas in his lap, and Al-Abbas would remove his head. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam told him, "My brother Abbas, keep your head in my lap. Why do you keep removing it?" Al-Abbas told him, "Brother Husayn, now you want to put my head in your lap. Who's going to be putting your head in their lap in 1 hour's time?" And then his soul departed. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam got up. He left Al-Abbas where he was lying. He did not try to carry him back. He started to walk towards the camp. History says he walked like the walk of a man whose back is broken. He started to head towards the camp, and history says he was wiping the tears of his eyes with the edges of his sleeves. The woman and the children were all out, waiting to see whether Al-Abbas would come back with the water. They saw Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam come back in this state. They started to ask Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, "Where is Al-Abbas? What has happened?" Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam did not talk to anyone. He continued to walk towards the tent of Al-Abbas, and he pushed down the pole holding the tent of Al-Abbas, bringing the tent of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas to the ground. Sayyidah Zainab alayha salam, as soon as she saw this, she said, "We are lost after you, my brother Abu al-Fadl." And Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam said, "Indeed, we are lost without you, my brother Abbas. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn wa ala ashab al-Husayn wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin."
أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. هاي الليلة آخر محاضرة السيد الله يحفظه، آخر محاضرة الدكتور السيد هاي الليلة، وإن شاء الله ترقبوا محاضراته الأسبوعية كل سبت من خلال الإعلان اللي يعلنه المركز، وهو الجروب اللي بيه السيد الله يحفظه. تابعوا الإعلان إن شاء الله حول محاضرات السبت من الآن فصاعدا. شكرا سيدنا، تقبل أعمالكم وما قصرت. هذا سند على